All right, y'all, today's episode is frustrating. It's about a viral stat. You may have seen it before. I know I've seen it a few times, but most recently I saw it on a friend's TikTok, and that just made it deeply personal to me. It's a smart friend. I admire their work. This stat supports the work they're doing, and yet they definitely should not have been using it. Here it is. The average adult makes 35,000 decisions a day. That's a huge number. And upon reflecting on this 35,000 decisions a day thing, maybe that's the point. This number is big, it's dramatic, it's almost as if it were designed to grab your attention. I mean, it certainly grabbed mine. You see it when people are talking about productivity hacks. You see it in videos advocating for self-care. You see it in marketing campaigns that are trying to sell you fixes for decision fatigue. Create a daily uniform so you don't have to choose what to wear every day. Meal prep so you don't have to think about what to eat. Are you running out of willpower by the end of the day? It's not your fault. It's because you've made 35,000 decisions. Microsoft even used this stat in an ad way back in 2017 to promote a to-do list app they had. And look, y'all, I get it. Decision fatigue is real, at least as far as I know. Making choices all day is exhausting. And yet, even though I'm exhausted with making decisions at the end of the day, I would be hard pressed to come up with 35,000 decisions I've made today. I mean, really, is the average person making 35,000 decisions a day? Let's break it down. And before we even go chase down this stat and where it came from, let's just start with the math. A day has 1,440 minutes, which is 86,400 seconds. So let's math it out. If you're making 35,000 decisions in a day, that's a decision every 2.5 seconds. But wait, that's if you were awake for 24 hours. If you were only awake for 12 hours, let's say you're really getting some good sleep, that would be one decision every 1.2 seconds, give or take. Let's say you're awake for a little more realistic, 16 hours. That's a decision every 1.6 seconds. Any way you slice this, from the moment you wake up, every second or two, you're making a decision in order to hit 35,000 decisions a day. And already to me, that just is seeming insane. So the little philosophy major in me is going back to my philosophy of mind, philosophy of action classes and being okay, so what is a decision? I'm walking Ken down the stairs to take him outside. Is the decision one decision because I'm deciding to take the stairs? Or is every step I take down a stair a decision? If you start counting every micro movement, every step you take, your blinking, your breaths in and out, honestly, 35,000 starts to seem pretty low. But if you're talking about decisions I'm deciding to go to the grocery store today, or I'm going to decide to go drink a cup of water, or I'm going to decide to answer this email, buy this thing online. If we think about decisions in that way, then 35,000 seems way too high. So where did this number come from? What types of decisions are they even talking about? This is the part that just shocks me, because my first instinct is to Google it, right? And Google AI tells me that this stat is true. ChatGPT tells me that this stat is true, right? So I'm wow, okay, where is the research? How are we getting 35,000 decisions a day? Because that seems wildly high to me. And then you go into the phrasing of every website cited, and you see language sources suggest, by some estimates, and you know what you don't see? Any actual study, any actual source. Sources are suggesting, well, where are the sources that are suggesting? So the earliest reference that I could find to this 35,000 stat is an article that was published by Roberts Wesleyan University, and it was titled 35,000 Decisions, The Great Choices of Strategic Leaders. And here's what they have to say. Various internet sources estimate that an adult makes about 35,000 remotely conscious decisions each day, brackets. In contrast, a child makes about 3,000. So they're saying various internet sources estimate. That's what the 35,000 is attributed to, right? Various internet sources. Then at the very end of that full sentence, they do this like drive-by citation for a book that's called Bad Moves: How Decision Making Goes Wrong and the Ethics of Smart Drugs. And this is a book that allegedly talks about the neuroscience of decision making and how drugs could be used to improve it. There is a free preview on Google. It does not mention the 35,000 decisions. And then there are discussion boards of people who have read the book asking like, hey, did I miss the part about the 35,000 decisions? Like, I don't see it in this book. Because obviously I'm not the only one who has had the question of where this stat comes from, y'all. And so what I could have done in doing this podcast episode is just skip the part that there's even a citation to this book that could potentially contain this like 35,000 decisions in it, right? Because that fits the narrative that I want to tell. But I'm not doing that. I want to be fully transparent here because it is confusing how this stat gets reported. And I think this is important, right? They are saying various internet sources estimate, and they are giving this stat. And then at the end of a sentence in which they also talk about children making decision, they are citing a book about the neuroscience of decision making and how drugs may or may not enhance it. That's confusing. It's bad writing. It's bad research. Like, I'm unhappy. I'm frustrated that I even have to like dig into this book at all. And I just keep thinking like, God, can people just not learn how to properly cite their sources? If various internet sources say it, list the various internet sources out so we can all go check them out. If the book really said it, I would expect to see a page number. I would expect to see more details about the study that was in the book. And I wouldn't expect to Google it and see people on forums being like, hey, did you see this stat in this book? Because I didn't. And so like the ridiculousness and like lack of due diligence then continues. In 2016, the Wall Street Journal runs this stat and says, by some estimates, in 2018, Psychology Today writes, in fact, some sources suggest. In 2018, the National Library of Medicine shares the same fact, and they cite the Wall Street Journal. Those were the by some estimates people. In 2021, PBS reports it and says it's estimated that. In 2022, CNN Health reports it as being attributed to Eva Krakow, who is a lecturer at the University of Leicester in the United Kingdom. And that sounds like a new source, right? No. This professor was the author of the Psychology Today article that said some sources suggest. In 2023, Harvard Business Review runs it saying various sources suggest. Well, good, because now we got a variety instead of just some. And Forbes, also in 2023, just runs it plain as simple as their opener to an article on decision fatigue. No source, no reference to some sources, just putting it out there like a fact. Everyone is pointing to someone else, but no one is actually verifying this number. It makes me think of the Spider-Man meme where they're all like just standing in a circle pointing at each other. And I also just have like this vivid recollection of an episode of The Newsroom where they want to run a story, but they are waiting for confirmation from a second source because they need that second source confirmation in order to run the story. And I'm just like, okay, like how are all these like quote unquote prestigious institutions not verifying the information? Like they're all okay just saying like some sources suggest, various internet sources like Wall Street Journal, Psychology Today, PBS, CNN, Harvard Business Review, Forbes. Like this is the standard for reporting. What happened? Now there is actual research on decision making. It's just not about 35,000 decisions a day. And candidly, like it's not great. Cornell University did a study on decision making around food, and this was back in 2006. It involved 129 university staff and students, and they found that you make an average of 219 or 221, depending on where you're reading their findings, decisions related to food each day. There was also a study conducted by Oreo, yes, Oreo as in the cookies, and this was published by news outlets in 2024. The US Sun, the Daily Express. Have I heard of either of them prior to doing this podcast episode? No, but like that's where this was. And what Oreo found was that adults make 16 major choices per day and spend about an hour and 32 minutes daily deliberating. And then Noom, the weight loss, like health and coaching app, they did a study also reported by I'm just going to say news outlets. Like it was in Yahoo Life. Um, and this was back in 2022. And it was about how adults make an average of 122 informed decisions each day. And this was specifically in Britain. Now, is 35,000 decisions anywhere in these studies or like anywhere close to like making 122 or 16 decisions? No. But the real issue is that we don't actually have good details on these studies. The Cornell study doesn't give a ton of details about like this group of staff and students and what features they did or did not have in common. The Oreo and the Noom studies, they say that they were polls, each of them of 2,000 people, but they don't tell you anything about these people or what the questions were that they were asked. And just like candidly, they're not getting reported in top tier press. So it's kind of like these organizations like did studies, sent out a press release, and like a few smaller outlets picked it up. Can you read the study anywhere online? Not that I can find. So like, do I trust the information from the study? No, because I can't even see the study. Like you're sharing the results of a study that you give absolutely no details on. And y'all, like this is why I say it's a frustrating episode, because I spent hours over the weekend, like trying to find the truth, trying to figure out where this came from, trying to figure out what we actually know about how many decisions people make per day. And even with all of that work, I just come to the same place of like, not a whole lot out there. Some of it's behind paywalls, some of it's super vague. We're just left guessing. And this space of like guessing is where bad numbers and fake stats like really thrive. And so I want to just take a moment here and like zoom out, because you might be thinking like, who cares? Like it's just a number about how many decisions we're making per day. Like whatever, it's not a big deal. And the thing is this isn't just about one bad stat. This is about how easy it is for misinformation to spread. And y'all, that is a big deal. Think about it. Harvard Business Review, PBS, Forbes, CNN, and more are all using this number without verifying it. If they do it for this, what else do they do it for? People believe this because they've seen someone they know and they trust say it, or they read it somewhere that they feel is reputable. Or maybe people just believe it because it feels true. Like, I too feel like I make 35,000 decisions a day. There's just so many. That's not facts, y'all. That's not research finds. That's not study shows. Like, this is potentially just completely made up, which is insane, and exactly why I started this podcast. Because if we let bad information like this slide, it just keeps spreading. And maybe misunderstanding the number of decisions that you make in a day is not a big deal. But I say again, if it's true for this stat, what other stats is it true for? Because some numbers are super important to your day-to-day life. Like you can't think that letting it slide in one area isn't going to affect people's trust in every other number that they see. When you see a stat or a fact, silly or not, before you share it, before you take it to heart and let it inform your worldview or a decision that you're making, I beg of you to please check to see if it's true. Find out where it came from, find out if there's a real study for it, ask the who, what, when, where, why of the study, like really dig in. Or in this case, even just do a first pass with the math and be like, does it make sense that someone could really make 35,000 decisions a day? Or is perhaps someone using this statistic to manipulate me, to sell me something, to shape my opinion of something? Because as you've hopefully heard in this episode, multiple sources can say the same thing, and that thing can still not be true or based in a fact. Since this is an episode about decisions, I want to talk for a moment about the two most important decisions that people can make in research. It's a bold claim, I know, and it is just my opinion, but I just feel like so passionately about this, especially after this like voyage into media reporting and misinformation that I went on this weekend. There are two decisions that researchers make that I honestly believe really impact quality and understanding of information and like what gets shared. these are the two decisions. The first one is the decision to make your work open access or not. And the second is the decision to share the full context of your study or not. So when you publish research, you have an option to make it open access. That means you're publishing it in a journal or somewhere else on a website where anyone can read it anytime. They don't have to pay money, like it is all out there. And if you make the choice to put your research behind the paywall, I feel pretty confident saying it is more likely that it is going to be misinterpreted, because people are going to look at the title, people are going to look at the abstract, people are going to look at the free little preview that they get. They're not going to get the full picture of your research, and they're going to run with it, especially if it's something that they can use in marketing or use to make good clickbait. I think as a researcher, you take a risk putting something behind a paywall. Your risk is that people will not accurately interpret your study because they will not have the opportunity to read the whole thing without paying money, which many of us, including myself in that, do not want to do. Are the most prestigious journals open access? Oftentimes, no. So people are like, my credibility takes a hit if I publish open access. Is it cheap to publish open access? Also, no. I have personally had to put thousands of dollars on a credit card to publish my research open access. It is a pain, it is a broken system, and still, by not publishing open access, you're basically taking that knowledge, locking it up, and being like, it's not that important that people know and fully understand this. It's a hot take, but it's my take, putting it out there. The second decision is when you are writing up your research, choosing to be fully transparent and sharing the full context or not, right? Let's look at this Cornell study, the part of it that was available open access. It was a pre-draft of the paper they published. They're not giving the full details on who are the students and staff that they talk to? What did they have in common? How did they actually count up how many food-related decisions those people were making a day? They don't tell you. That is important context for understanding the results of that study. So when you are writing up to share your results, for the love of God, give people the whole story. I can't imagine submitting a paper to publication and not giving that level of detail, but I've read enough studies to know that not everyone's giving a lot of details about the work they're doing. And I just want to say, the more the better, people. When you got to cut your word count down to get something in a journal, cut the flowery language, because we need to know things like how many people, what year, tell us a bit about those people. What was your data collection protocol? How did you get the information? What questions did you ask? These are such critical pieces of context for understanding the results of your work. Why the heck are we leaving them out? And if you are like Oreo or Noom or these other organizations, companies that are doing these studies, I guess self-funded, however it is you're doing those studies, oh my gosh, put a PDF up of the study. Explain to people what you did and how you did it. That transparency is what builds trust. That's what gives people faith in your numbers. And if you choose not to publish those details, or you choose to put those details behind a paywall, misinformation can fill in the gaps. Which brings me to my final point. We need more good people in research and reporting. Wouldn't it be cool to actually know how many decisions we make in a day? That's an interesting question. That is something that people could study. And I just think about this generally. When we learn cool things, helpful things, interesting things about the world around us, it is because someone is engaging in science. Someone is engaging in research. And that is so important. There are so many questions that we could seek an answer to. I really want to see more good people doing it and then publishing it open access so we can all learn and benefit from your good work. Let's stop accepting these bogus stats. The fact that they're going viral says to me, this is something that people are interested in and want to know. So let's actually go find out. This has been Is This Legit? With me, your host, Dr. Kirsten Lee Hill. Remember, question everything, especially the science that makes it to your screens.